Hello, my name is Stephen Birch. I'd just like to do a short introduction about the treatment methods from Japan using acupuncture for treatment of children. I will be doing a workshop in Poland, and hopefully this will give you enough information to make a decision about taking the class. The treatment method is called Shonishin. And the workshop is a workshop on Shonishin, Japanese acupuncture for children. As you can see, I live and work in Holland. I'm also an academic and affiliated with researchers in Norway. I've been treating children with Japanese acupuncture for around 40 years. I first started using only the basic Shonishin technique. I will explain what that is in just a minute. Then I started adding very simple symptomatic treatment methods, modified acupuncture, moxibustion techniques so that they're suitable for babies, small children, older children, etc. And then after learning meridian therapy, Kerapuchirio, I learned, especially the Toyohari system, I learned how to use that also on children. So I've been teaching treatment of children using Shonishin methods and the above methods since the 1990s. I was persuaded to write a book on Shonishin. It was first published in 2011. The second edition was released in 2016. So what is Shonishin? Okay, what we're talking about for this workshop is combining three different treatment methods, different kinds of branch and different kind of root treatment methods. The three parts that are combined are the Shonishin method, which is a kind of whole body root treatment. You do something similar on most kids, most children, regardless of their symptoms, regardless of any traditional concepts about patterns and so on. And then also a very simple form of meridian therapy, which makes a diagnosis using traditional ideas. You judge the pattern to treat, you treat points related to the pattern. And then applying simple symptomatic treatments like leaving a small press tack on one or 2 points, or needling very briefly and painlessly 1 or 2 points. So Shonishin is a simple, non-invasive treatment system. It started in Japan around 300 years ago. It applies light stroking and tapping on the surface of the body, adjusted to the age of the child, adjusted to the health status of the child. And the treatment is done in these kind of simple fixed patterns. Here we have pictures from a book published in Japan in the 1960s, where you see lines or arrows, that's where you stroke, and where you see the dots, that's where you tap. I'll show you a more updated version of this in a minute. Examples of tools that we use. This is a picture from a museum collection in Osaka. But you can see all of those tools are non-inserted. Some are scary looking, they look a bit sharp, and so on. But there's very simple generic tools that we typically use. These are tools that we might use for tapping. You use the pointy end. You have to learn how to hold the instrument correctly. This is something I teach in great detail, how to hold the instrument correctly, and then how to do the tapping so that you can make it appropriate for a newborn baby, a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, etc. And then stroking, we use some of the same instruments, but now we use the rounded end, the end at the bottom here. There's a variety of tools that we can use for stroking. They're literally round. Here's a tool called an enshin. There's a round ball on the end that we do light stroking with that. And armed with these kinds of treatment tools, and as you can see from the picture, there's quite a variety of different treatment tools available. I'm merely showing here some of the more commonly used ones. We apply stroking and tapping on the surface of the body, adjusted to the age of the child and the health status of the child. The number of strokes, number of taps, and the force of stroking and force of tapping varies according to the age and health status of the child. And in this updated picture here, where you see red arrows, is where you might be stroking. Where you see shaded areas is where you might do the tapping. It's very, very simple. Okay. And in addition to that, because of my studies and having learned meridian therapy, especially the Toyohari system, it's very easy to also identify a pattern and treat the pattern. Meridian therapy started for treatment of adults, and after identifying the pattern, it involved, starting in the 1930s, early 1940s, it involved inserting needles very shallowly and painlessly into the surface of the body at the relevant acupuncture points during tonification and draining techniques. But then after the 1950s, the techniques were modified by instead of inserting needles, which is really difficult to do on children, especially babies and toddlers, using a spring-loaded tension. It was developed specifically by one of the founders of meridian therapy for treatment of children. And here's a picture of the tool. So inside the solid, the wider part of the body is a spring, and the longer, thinner part at the bottom there is held at the surface of the skin, and you move the instrument up and down based on the spring. Because that's difficult to get hold of these days, there's a more recent updated version called the Shonishin, which is the one that I teach and that I teach how to use and so on. You can see a variety of springs. Using the softer spring, you apply a very, very, very light, I mean really unbelievably light, super light rhythmic pressure. The rhythm comes from the slow up and down movement of the instrument at the key acupuncture points. Okay, so the meridian therapy constitutes a kind of root treatment. Obviously, the kind of diagnoses that we do on adults can be very difficult to do on babies and small children. They won't stay still. They don't answer questions. They don't have a health history that goes back 30 years. And the pulse is really difficult to read on babies and toddlers. So we have a very simplified method of making a diagnosis that's everybody can learn how to do it. Everybody can learn how to use this tool, just as everybody can learn how to use the stroking and tapping tools. The Shonishin is a kind of root treatment that is not based on a pattern. It just makes chi move better, makes it descend in the body. The meridian therapy is a more specific root treatment that targets the main weaknesses, the main deficiency or cure, the main pattern in the body. There's no inserted needles here. It's very easy for babies, toddlers, older children, even older children that are scared, afraid to go to an acupuncturist. This is very easy to learn, very easy to apply. After one or two treatments, the children who are fearful are no longer fearful. It's very easy. And then in addition to that, we also will apply some symptomatic treatments. And sometimes we don't need to. Sometimes only the root treatment or root treatments can help a child improve quite strongly already. But more often than not, we have to apply some kind of simple symptomatic treatment. And since the invention of the new Syrian Pionex needle, the press tack needle, I really find those are very easy to use. Everybody can use them. There's no pain associated with them. There's nothing fearful or scary about them. They're super safe. They come really short. They're 0.3 millimeters long and 0.6 millimeters long. Those are the smallest acupuncture needles in the world. They're very easy to apply. Here's the typical pots. And as you go from left to right, going from orange to yellow to green, the length of the needle goes longer. And the longer ones I only use on adults. The orange and yellow ones, the shorter ones, 0.3, 0.6, are wonderful for children. Here's an image of the tape that covers the needle, and the one on the right shows the plastic body where the needle is inserted, and so it sticks out from that small plastic body about 0.3, 0.6 millimeters. It comes in pre-sterilized packages. They're very easy to apply. Okay, so it's difficult not to use these on children. They're perfect for treating children. There's no fighting, there's no fear. Well, maybe the first visit, kids are naturally a bit scared. Maybe they don't like your face, for example. Second visit, they think it's funny, usually. And then additionally, you might need to do some other technique like simply inserting needles. And when we do insert needles, a characteristic of Japanese acupuncture is the modern Chinese idea of what is dochi, which is inserting a needle, manipulating it to produce sensory stimulation, such as throbbing, aching, numbness, tingling, electrical sensations. We do not do that. In fact, I believe that's a mistaken understanding of what is dochi. Okay, that's a technical argument. I'm not going to get into that here. But we avoid that at all costs. We want to make sure the children don't feel the needles. So when we do insert needles in children, as part of the workshop, we'll cover how do you do this so that you're virtually guaranteed to be painless, so that children will tolerate what you're doing and not fight back or resist or get upset. Okay, and then another thing that we developed starting in the 1980s, working in the US, we found that some children actually need more treatment than we had time to do, or the schedule didn't fit. So teaching a little bit of the stroking and tapping at home, having the parents do it at home, we found, wow, that can be really a useful thing. So that's also something that's an advantage of this treatment method. Because there's no inserted needles, the techniques are very light, very easy to learn, very easy to reproduce. Also, we can teach parents with children who have more chronic, difficult problems to do a very light, simple treatment at home. So that's also something we teach in the workshop. And of course, dose management is very, very, it's a key feature. It's very, very important for treatment of children. You can't do the same needling on an adult that you might use on an adult. You can't do that on a 10-year-old. You really seriously cannot do that kind of needling on a baby or a toddler. You need to really make the treatment acceptable so that the children will accept it, but also in doing so, you're lowering the dose. You're making it non-invasive. You're making it thinner needles, more shallowly inserted. If you have to insert needles, you want them to not feel it. The dose, the issue of dose and lowering the dose or raising the dose, or sorry, on children, you make a judgment about what is an appropriate dose, and then based upon their condition, you lower it. And on babies and small children, you use the lowest dose. And as the child ages and gets older, you can increase the dose gradually till you see the treatment effect you're looking for. But if you have this aged child and they have more serious symptoms, you lower the dose again. So this is a really important issue. It will come up repeatedly throughout the workshop. For many acupuncturists, this is quite a new concept, because the concept of dose is not really talked about much in most acupuncture training. Anyway, the workshop is quite practical as much as possible. I will, after lecturing about techniques, I will demonstrate them on you as participants. And then at a certain point, I have you repeat them on me so I can double check your understanding, how you're touching, how you're doing the technique, how you can modify the dose as you're doing the treatment and so on. This tends to be a quite popular workshop because any acupuncturist, no matter what background you have, no matter what you do on adult patients, anyone can use this method on treating children or combine these treatment methods, and it can be very, very effective. In the book that I showed on the second slide, there's a lot of case histories, and some of them are quite dramatic in the sense that with very little treatment, children can sometimes change very, very quickly, much more rapidly than adult patients, which makes the treatment very enjoyable and very rewarding. So I hope to see some of you there, and I'm going to finish here. Thank you very much.